Hello, everyone. Welcome to Walk the Parks. My name is Blake. Today, we're going to do an absolutely amazing hike in Bryce Canyon National Park. We are going to do the Navajo Queen's Garden Loop, and we're going to do it in a counterclockwise fashion. We're going to start at Sunset Point, and we're going to go down the Navajo Trail, and then we're going to go up the Queen's Garden Trail to Sunrise Point, and then back to Sunset Point along the rim, and then back to the parking lot. You can really park anywhere between Sunrise Point or Sunset Point to do this loop. This is one of the most popular hikes in Bryce Canyon National Park. It's absolutely fantastic, super highly recommended. If there were one hike I would do in the park, it would probably be this one. There is also this other part you can do called Wall Street. Wall Street is actually closed for much of the year due to rockfall potential, but that hike is absolutely amazing too. You could go down and just do like Navajo and Wall Street, and that's absolutely fantastic. We'll go over and see where it's closed. That hike is awesome. As you can see, kind of not the most ideal conditions today. A little bit of rain, and it's all good. If you noticed, I did just have a bunch of different signs and like the photos, and we'll go through and I'll read all of those to you over the course of this hike. First off, why would you watch this? I think there's really three reasons. One, you're thinking about going here or you're going to go here. You're kind of deciding which hikes am I going to do, and you want to check them out. So my videos, uh, quite a lot of them, go through the entire hike, so you can really check it out. You can see what it's like and if it's something you'd be interested in. Second, I think a good reason to watch this video is for people who may never come to Bryce Canyon National Park. Sure, there's a lot of like super well produced like videos and stuff like that. Check those out. But maybe the video of the whole hike gives a little bit more of a fully immersive experience. So if you're never going to come here, this might be a cool way to experience the most popular hike and the most beautiful hike, in my opinion, in the park. Um, I say that and then I'm like, oh, is it really the most beautiful? I don't know, but it's quite beautiful. So again, here we are at Sunset Point, and the view from here is just amazing. That's one really cool thing about Bryce Canyon National Park is that it doesn't really require a ton of effort. Like if you're a person who just kind of wants to enjoy the viewpoints, you're still going to get a ton of bang for your buck. I mean, look for this. Look at this. I just walked like a couple hundred yards from my vehicle and get this amazing view. Back to parking. This park can actually get quite busy, and because of that, they actually have quite a fantastic shuttle bus system. So, as I was mentioning, you can kind of park anywhere between Sunrise and Sunset Point. That would be like the closest parking, but it can be quite busy, especially in this area. So, another good idea might be to um, you can park at the visitor center and take the shuttle bus from there, or you can also park just outside the park, and there's a quite a large parking lot, and you can park there and kind of go in. So here we are. Now we're dropping below the rim. We're going into the Bryce Canyon Amphitheater. Um, you know, any hike that starts at the rim, you are going to have to climb back out. I know that sounds obvious, but it will be quite a bit more challenging. This is a this park is at quite high elevation. Like I think we're starting here at like 8,000 feet or so at the rim. So keep that in mind. If you're from a lower elevation area, you will definitely feel the elevation. And that kind of varies in its effect. Like for some people, it can really take the breath out of you, make even the easiest hike or the easiest incline much more challenging. So for a lot of people, it makes them more dehydrated. So kind of keep those things in mind if you're from lower elevation and haven't really gotten acclimated. All right, so here we are at where Wall Street, where we would go down. Again, this hike is absolutely amazing. You can look down there and see, like it would be really cool to hike down there, and it is really cool to hike down there, but the last few times I've been to the park, it has been closed. I think it's more closed like fall, winter, spring lately because you have a chance of um, water basically going into cracks and then freezing at night, so then it expands. So rockfall potential is significantly higher. I will say, as you could see, the pavement was quite wet at the top, and this trail was quite muddy. Definitely be careful. It's very slick and muddy in a couple places. Like Well, I'll mention it later in just a few minutes when I'm going down, but the trail was really slick. I really thought I was gonna fall. Um, and my apologies, because I am shooting this also with a 360 camera. I'll release that video at a later point. I also have another video that's the same hike going the opposite direction, so it's going in clockwise direction, and it's in 2 times speed. So if you're interested in that, I will put that down in the description. I just love, well, first off, I love this park so much. It's so beautiful. There are so many fun things to do and explore here. As I said, it like the reward to effort ratio is like I feel super high. Like you get such good rewards on pretty much all of the hikes here. They're all pretty awesome. And even if you go just to here, I mean, it's absolutely amazing. So just consider that in your travels. And again, if you only have one hike, this hike is about 3 miles and maybe like 600 to 700 feet elevation gain. So keep that in mind. That is pretty significant. And also keep in mind that, you got to climb back out at the end. That's the hardest part of canyon hikes. I just think of Grand Canyon when it's like that. That is oh my God, you go all the way to the bottom. You have like 5 to 6,000 feet of vertical, which is higher than just about anything you can find, really. I mean, there's a couple mountains that are like that near me in Colorado, but even more 14ers start at like 10,000 feet or higher. So you're really only doing like 4,000 feet of gain. Um, but anyway, we're not talking about the Grand Canyon too much. I always love to sneak that in just because I love that place so much. I feel like this is a really cool day. That's why I went and did this hike, even though it was muddy and not really the most recommended conditions. This area is famous for having bright blue skies, which also look awesome, but I feel like the stormy look is a little bit more unique. So I was interested to go in here. And again, yeah, my 360 camera kind of gets in the way of some of this footage, but I think you get a really good idea. And I'm going back to reasons to watch this video. I think the third and final one would be to have something in the background, like if you're at the gym on the treadmill or something like that. You can kind of follow this along. Feel free to mute me if you want to and just enjoy the background. But it's kind of cool to feel like if you were running or on the treadmill or walking on a treadmill or an elliptical or something like that, to have something cool in the background. So here you go. I also put the videos either just on mute or I'll listen to them on like one of my monitors while I'm working, and I will just kind of work on the other monitor and have this one so I have something cool to look up at. That doesn't require much like paying attention. I can just look up at any point and see I'll be on some cool part of the hike. So all these things around here, this is called the Bryce Canyon Amphitheater, and all these kind of spires, rock spires that so famous in Bryce Canyon National Park. Those are called hoodoos, and there's just a super high concentration of them here. Absolutely amazing. Around this area, like the greater area, you can definitely see quite a lot of hoodoos. Um, God, look at me just messing with my 360 camera. Sorry for a little bit of funny editing in here. So this loop is about 3 miles long, as I said. I did do the side trail into Queen's Garden. The side trail to Queen's Garden is very short, so if you see the sign and you're like, oh, I don't know if I want to do more, just know that it's really only like 100 yards or so each way. All right, so this is really cool. And if Wall Street is open, you can just do this part and come back up and like go, either go down Wall Street or come up this way. And that's like a shorter hike that is pretty spectacular. I really like the Queen's Garden too. And then there is a connector part that's pretty long that you'll see in the middle. But it's pretty easy. It's like fairly mellow and kind of a walk through the forest. So I do enjoy doing that part too. You could, of course, do out and backs of any of this. So now look here, there are a ton of switchbacks that we're about to go down. There's some rocks piled up. I don't know whether that's to repair it or that those kind of all washed out. I think it might actually be a product of both. So the washed out and then they kind of put them in a pile and then they're going to fix them at some point soon. Let me know if they're fixed next time you guys go. If you find this video useful at all, it does really help me if you either like or subscribe, so I appreciate that. So this is the part where, well, not quite, but I feel like a lot of this section was where I really thought I was going to fall. because it was a little bit slick and a little bit muddy, but at least it didn't cake onto my shoes. There are like I feel like there's a lot of types of soil like this where you'll go and your shoes will just weigh like 20 pounds each if it's wet because it'll just every single bit of mud will just stick. But that wasn't the case here, which is kind of a relief. So I think it's really recommended to do this hike in a clockwise direction. We're doing it in the counterclockwise direction. Honestly, I don't think it matters that much. But the ideal clockwise, you kind of go down Queen's Garden, and it's a little bit less steep going down, but a little bit steeper going up. So depending how you feel about that, some people don't want as steep going down, and some people would prefer the steep down and the less steep up. Kind of a personal preference. I think on the Park Service's website, though, they do recommend clockwise as well. Absolutely beautiful in here. The park, as I said, so Bryce Canyon doesn't, I don't think it's quite as popular as, say, Zion, which is fairly close to here, maybe only like 45-minute to an hour drive. But Bryce is still pretty popular. I mean, they're getting, as statistics are a little bit challenging to find on this, but 2 million plus visitors a year, which is definitely a lot of people. And the park does range from over 6,500 feet in elevation to over 9,000 feet at Rainbow Point. There's really one major road through the park, and it just kind of goes all the way uphill. So you start at the visitor center, and then it's just up, and it ends at Rainbow Point all the way at the top, which is over 9,000 feet. There's some other cool hikes up there, like the Bristlecone Loop. You can do the Under the Rim Trail. There's another like 5 mile loop around there, and absolutely beautiful. The Under the Rim Trail itself is like something like 20 to 30 miles long. I've been really lucky, and I've come to Bryce Canyon probably like I don't even know, like 12 times or something now, and every time I absolutely love it. And I think I've done this hike every single time I've ever gone here. So maybe that'll test is a little bit of a testament of how amazing it really is. Some things that maybe I don't capture as well that you'll see in person is just how the kind of towering walls on each side. This is a pretty narrow canyon, and it's really cool to experience that, just the walls that are coming up. I love the contrast too and the color between the trees and the side of the canyon. Very cool. Supposedly this is not really a canyon. You're just at the edge of a plateau that is eroding away in just a fantastic way. So it's kind of interesting to think about that. Most canyons are filled by some sort of stream or through flash floods. I remember watching there was like a video in the visitor center a long time, I think is where I saw it. And or no, it was somewhere else, but it was named for Ebenezer Bryce, the this canyon here. And he's settler. He has a quote of his most famous quote was a hell of a place to lose a cow. That's pretty funny. I can just imagine going back way back in the day and trying to find a cow in this crazy like maze. Even just the trails, it's just like, wow, that's insane. Bryce Canyon became a national monument in 1923, and it became Bryce Canyon National Park in 1928. The best time to visit would be basically spring, summer, and fall. 60% of visitors come between June through September. Winter can be really cold here. I think this whole area, sometimes people might kind of have a perception that it's really hot because it's kind of deserty in a lot of the surrounding areas. But desert can get extremely cold too. Really, what makes something a desert is the amount of precipitation, not necessarily the temperature. That said, it can get really hot in the summer, and you want to be careful because, and right now we're about to take the side trail up to Two Bridges. You want to be careful in the summer because it's just famously like not a cloud in the sky. I mean, obviously, my whole trip that I shot a lot of my videos on was actually very stormy. Um, but a lot of times it can be just super hot. So be careful. Make sure to drink water. Make sure to bring, um, and two bridges is cool. See, there's one like lower one. It's further back and one higher. Very cool, unique structures in this park. But it can be super hot. Make sure to have salt as well. And because of the dryness of the environment, it can be kind of tough to tell sometimes. You might be sweating lots, but it evaporates almost instantly. So because of that, you're not maybe not getting as drenched as you would in another area. But and when you're drenched, you might think, oh, I should drink more water to compensate for that. Whereas here, you might not notice as well. But the real important thing is salt. You want to keep your body just loses a ton of salt, and you want to replenish that. Water, it's water is good too. You want to keep drinking water, but you don't want to overdo it. There's actually hyponatremia is something you can have if you drink too much water, where which pretty much lowers the concentration of salt in your blood to an unsafe level. So again, the real focus should be on salt, but water a little bit as well. One note about winter, even though I didn't say that was the most ideal time, is it can actually be absolutely fantastic. The contrast between the white snow and these beautiful, kind of bright orange, and if you get it on a day that with the snow, with no clouds in the sky, it's absolutely fantastic. Can be kind of hard to get here, though, and a little bit like tricky. Like I would want to have snow tires, depending when you go. Most rental cars don't have snow tires, so just make sure you got good tires on them if you're going to come here in winter, but absolutely fantastic. So, this is a really cool park. You have campgrounds in the park. There's two of them. Both of them at the time of this recording are actually were first come, first served. There are certain dates though where I believe they become like you have to reserve them. So, um, as I mention this, just make sure. This is why I try not to quote any of these things too directly. I'm now thinking to one of my other videos where I kind of said they were both first come, first serve, but that's only during certain dates. So basically, for every park nowadays, you really have to go to the park websites and recreation.gov before you go, because you really want to double check like what kind of entry restrictions there are, if any, what the deal is with camping and things like that. Gone are the days when you can just kind of show up and, most likely get a campsite. There is free camping not too far outside of the park. I'll leave it to you to kind of research that more. I don't necessarily want to give exact directions again in case regulations have changed and things like that. But last couple times I was there, there was really good camping right outside the park. Just remember outside the park, inside the park, try to leave no trace. Basically, you don't want to litter at all. That's one of the most amazing things about all of our national parks in America that I've noticed. There's almost no trash anywhere. It's amazing. Let's keep it that way. Same thing. I mean, one of the benefits, I mean, I know a lot of people are like, oh, I want to camp for free, and you camp for free outside the park, and that's great. The only downside is that, well, one of the downsides is that there's typically no restrooms in a lot of the free dispersed camping areas, so you really have to be prepared for that and bring your own kind of method of disposing waste, because especially places that are super highly used, if they get abused too much, they will certainly be closed or turned into kind of reservation based, specific campsites, designated campsites and things like that. So keep that in mind. All right, so next, so we've basically finished the really cool narrow part of the Navajo Trail, and now we're coming up to an intersection. I will say that I feel like this intersection confuses a lot of people, and it is a bit confusing because if you kind of go straight-ish, like straight to the right-ish a little bit, that leads over to the Peekaboo Loop, which is also fantastic. And if you go hard right, that leads you to Wall Street, and that is the area that's closed. And then we're going to go hard left, which is going to take us over to Queen's Garden. This is the more kind of mellow middle part of this hike. So there's not, I mean, the views are still good in the distance, but you're really kind of walking through the forest. So just be careful at that intersection right there. I think it's most confusing when you go the other, like coming the other way, like where these people are coming. that are coming towards me. So just pay attention as always. Like sometimes, especially on more crowded trails, which I would most likely consider this trail, sometimes people will kind of stop where the signs are and examine them. I mean, as you should, to pay attention, but kind of block them too. So just make sure to kind of always be aware for things like that. Because if you miss a turn here, it probably wouldn't be too horribly detrimental, but in a lot of places it could be, if until you realize it, you'll have to turn around and hike that whole way back. So again, absolutely beautiful views as you can see here, but we're a little bit more kind of in the distance, right? We're kind of like at the valley bottom per se. All right, so next up, I'm going to read all of the signs that we encountered along the way. All right, so the first one right near the parking lot said Bryce Canyon. Because no river runs through it, Bryce Canyon is not truly a canyon. Instead, it is a series of natural amphitheaters carved into the edge of the Pound-Sugunt Plateau. These bowl-shaped features contain the world's largest collection of varied rock spires known as hoodoos. We welcome you to Bryce Canyon National Park and invite you to discover the sublime beauty and rich history of this land. Visiting the park? Stop at the Visitor Center for information, exhibits, publications, backcountry information, and park bookstore. Pick up a visitor's guide for more information on popular activities and areas to visit. Know before you go. Leave no trace. Stay on designated trails, leave what you find, and take what you bring. Climbing is not permitted in the park. Dehydration, altitude, sickness, and ankle injuries are the most common emergencies. Drink 1 liter of water every 2 hours, know your limits, and wear proper footwear. If you hear thunder, lightning strikes are possible. Move immediately to a building or vehicle. Avoid trees, hoodoos, and other tall objects. Just one quick side comment on that. I read that this is one of the most popular lightning strike areas in all of Utah. And just think about it too, you're on the rim a lot of the time. So definitely use caution of lightning here. I remember one time, gosh, I've had some crazy experiences at Bryce Canyon. One time I rode my bike on a 1,000-mile journey, and I remember riding into Bryce Canyon National Park, and there was just a big thunderstorm. Oh my gosh, I remember at one point I just like put my bike down and like ran away from it, and the lightning was so close too. I remember then I kept going. I took like it seemed like things had calmed down a bit, so I was like, all right, let me get back on my bike. And then I got to the campground, and then same thing. I remember going, just throwing my bike down and running into the restroom, because if you're on your bike, you don't really have a shelter to go in or a vehicle. So I was happy to see that restroom and kind of go right in there. And I've also been to this park. I walked one time. I made up a through hiking route, and I walked from all the way from Yellowstone, Old Faithful, all the way down to the Grand Canyon, and that was about a 3,000-mile route that I made up and hiked. And I connected every national park in Colorado, excuse me, Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, Nevada, and then went down to the Grand Canyon. And I remember it being really cold when I got here. It was just so cold. I wanted to stay in the hotel like several nights. Like I did get a hotel because it was so cold. I was like, oh, I needed to dry my stuff because I've been hiking so much. So it's really nice to have a hotel. But I remember leaving and there was like a cold front and it was like 20 degrees and windy. It was just so cold. But I came and did a big hike and it was great. Um, but anyway, crazy times here at Bryce Canyon National Park. It's awesome. All right, back to the signs. Help protect wildlife. Do not approach or feed any animal. Many wildlife deaths are caused by speeding vehicles. Pets are permitted on paved surfaces only. Keep pets on leash and clean up after them. Bicycles are allowed on paved surfaces only. They are not permitted on or below the rim. Drones are not permitted. Violators face legal action and fines. Report drone use to nearest ranger. And it says, please use the shuttle bus service, which operates April through October, to visit more popular views and trails in the Bryce Amphitheater to help minimize traffic congestion and reduce air pollution. Shuttles arrive every 10 to 15 minutes. Unlimited use of park shuttle bus is included with the entrance fee. So that's pretty cool. There's also a QR code linking to the National Park Service app, which is actually quite good. I've had good experience with it. It's cool because you can kind of download the parks, like the full park before you visit, and it includes a lot of cool brochures and maps of hikes and stuff like that. So it might be a good idea. The cool part too is, a lot of national parks might not have service in a lot of areas. So if you have the app, it'll give you that. If you download it ahead of time, you'll have you don't need service to access all the useful information. And here we go, Rim Trail Sunset Point. So we'll do this at the end. This is kind of like one of the first signs we encountered, though. So let's see here. Panoramic vistas of the world's largest collection of hoodoos greet you along the rim of Bryce Amphitheater. From south to north, scenic overlooks include Bryce, Inspiration, Sunset, Sunrise, and Fairyland Points. The easiest portion, from Sunrise to Sunset Point, is approximately 0.5 miles long and is flat and paved. From April to October, you can use the park shuttle to enjoy one way hikes between the viewpoints. The shuttle does not stop at Fairyland Point. In winter, the section of rim trail between Bryce and Inspiration Points is closed. It says be prepared for changing weather, carry a water and a map. And the whole rim trail is about 5.5 miles long from Bryce Point to Fairyland Point, and the difficulty varies. So, yeah, it does kind of go up and down for sure, particularly that section from Fairyland Point back over to Sunrise Point is definitely up and down. You think a lot of times you'd think, or I thought, rim trail, but I remember doing that, and this isn't in this video, but I remember thinking, this is harder than I imagined. So keep that in mind. All right, cool. So then there's a sign that says hike the Hoodoos, Queen's Garden. At Bryce Canyon, weathering can alter huge rocks within a human lifetime. Rain and frost wedging carve these stones into curious shapes, including the Queen Victoria hoodoo, which was named for a statue in London, England. If you use your imagination, you might see the hoodoo queen riding an animal. What kind? How many years do you think it will take the queen's shape to change? And we're not quite to this sign yet. This is just going to be in a few moments. Also on this sign, that this is if you take the little side trail down to Queen's Garden, which we will, and it says you have found the Queen's Garden benchmark on the I Hiked the Hoodoos Challenge, a way to stay healthy and have fun in your national park. To meet the challenge, either find 3 benchmarks or hike 3 miles or 4.8 kilometers on trails that have benchmarks. See map in park newspaper or junior ranger booklet. Bring rubbings of the benchmarks or photos of yourself with them to the visitor center to receive a small prize. That's kind of a cool game. The sign looks pretty old, so I don't know if that's still a thing, but I would think it is. I bet actually it looks old in some ways due to all the people making the kind of doing the rubbing of the benchmark. Next up, we have Queen's Garden Trail sign. Although many find it challenging, this is the least strenuous trail descending into Bryce Amphitheater. This trail follows a ridge 9/10 of a mile or 1.4 kilometers down to the Queen Victoria and her Garden of Hoodoos. Hikers can either turn around and return or continue on to ascend the Navajo Loop, the Queen's Navajo combination loop, which we're doing, or the Peekaboo Loop, which is a figure 8 combination. That's also awesome. Peekaboo is fantastic. I do have another video on that. I don't do a figure 8 combination, but I kind of go down from the rim and then go back up. Another beautiful hike. Know before you go. Leave no trace. Stay on designated trails. Leave what you find and take what you bring. Climbing's not permitted in the park. Okay, so this kind of just repeats all the safety stuff that we had before. The other thing to note, though, that we didn't talk about before, the Queen's Garden Loop, like if you just do an out and back, it would be 1.8 miles round trip, rated moderate difficulty with about 450 feet of total elevation gain. Next up, it's called The Life of Hoodoos. Rain and melting snow erode the edge of this high plateau at a rate of 1 to 4 feet every century. As the rim erodes, harder caprock layers preserve softer rocks below, forming rock walls called fins. Here at 8,000 feet, nightly temperatures fall below freezing half of the year. Snowmelt and rain trickle into cracks and expand as it turns to ice, featuring the rock and forming holes called windows. This process is called frost wedging. Chemical weathering also occurs as acids and precipitation dissolve the calcium carbonate that holds the rocks together. Look at this. This is a pretty cool area of the park built. You can take a break on that big log there, and it's nice and shady, which is pretty cool. All right, so as rocks expand, the cap rock collapses, creating irregular rock spires called hoodoos. Bryce Canyon has the greatest concentration of hoodoos on Earth. Once hoodoos are separated, weathering and erosion accelerate, ultimately wearing them down. The rounded hills to the east show where the high plateau rim once existed. Currently, the climate here provides a perfect balance of freezing and thawing temperatures to create hoodoos. As global temperatures rise, fewer freeze thaw cycles may occur, creating more rounded hoodoos shaped more by rain and chemical weathering than ice. The legend people. Before there were any Indians, the legend people, Ungwa, lived in that place. That's from a quote from the Paiute Indians. Paiute Indians inhabited this region for hundreds of years before the arrival of European Americans. A sacred oral tradition of the Paiutes states that hoodoos are ancient legend people turned into stone by coyote as punishment for bad deeds. It is the custom of the Paiutes to tell these stories only during the winter season. Spring, summer, and fall are for hunting, gathering, and storing food. It is out of respect for this custom that the authentic story is not repeated here. Interesting. And my apologies on some of these pronunciations. I'm sure I'm getting them wrong. So now we're kind of at a cool part of the trail, though. Look at this, like, kind of narrow little crack that we're going through, which is very cool. And we're also about to come to the intersection where we're going to take a left and go down into Queen's Garden, which, as I mentioned, is just a short kind of side trail. And you can see up ahead, we're kind of approaching, getting back into the kind of highlights, or, just closer to the hoodoos, which is really cool. As I mentioned, I enjoy this full loop though, because I kind of like this like long middle section. I think it's kind of fun. A little bit more mellow. If you go on the other way, it'll be like slightly downhill the whole way, whereas this way it's kind of slightly uphill the whole way. So maybe that's the good reason. Maybe better off doing it clockwise. And even though the section at the end is a little bit steeper to get out of the canyon, a lot of times you're kind of going slower in that area anyway, and you don't mind stopping because there's lots of, I mean, not that there's not a lot of photo opportunities everywhere, but there's quite a lot of photo opportunities in that more narrow, like Navajo Loop section. But again, if Wall Street's open too, it's worth exploring there as well if you have the energy. All right, so this is the turnoff. So first we're going to go over to Queen Victoria, and then we're going to go up to Sunrise Point and do the climb. It's really pretty. I love like as you can see in this kind of shot really well, like there's like orange, and there's kind of like a almost like a light orange or like a peach color, and then it kind of almost goes towards not quite white, like an off-white color, which is gorgeous. Just fantastic. Queen Victoria. And then this sign was the one that has the benchmark on it that we looked at earlier. I'm sure I'll go look at this and then take a photo of it. But there she is in her glory, Queen Victoria. A little bit hard to see. What do you guys think? Does that look like Queen Victoria? And they also mentioned like it might look like she's riding some sort of animal. I don't know. I'm thinking about it for a little bit. I'm not sure what kind of animal she's riding. What do you guys think? All right, so goodbye, Queen Victoria. Now we're just going back. So as you can see, this trail's pretty short, probably worthwhile. It's fun to check out the Queen Victoria Hoodoo. I feel like you can kind of play the game, like their game they suggested is like what animal is Queen Victoria riding, but you can kind of play the game of like what else did the Hoodoos look like? You know, I remember one time I found a what looked to be a dog playing a piano, which was pretty cool. Even directly to the left here, it looks like one of those big like brontosaurus or brachiosaurus, you know, that's long neck sticking up. But anyway, a fun game to play here for sure for kids and adults alike. All right, so then now we're almost back to the intersection. You go through this cool tunnel. I don't think the tunnel is natural. Maybe it is though. If anybody knows, let me know. And we're gonna kind of go up. Beautiful. I remember hiking this and just really enjoying this last part of the hike up to the rim because the sun kind of started to come out and it was kind of like later on in the evening. So you kind of got that, you know, that golden hour plus the storm clearing together. So it's really fantastic light, like as you can see, kind of straight ahead. Just absolutely beautiful. And as you can see, there's kind of a bunch of social trails there, but then there's a sign right in front of it pointing to trail. Not 100% sure of the exact regulations there, whether you're allowed to go off it or not. So I chose not to. All right, so then one of the next signs is Serial Homesteaders, Ebenezer and Mary Bryce. Scottish born Ebenezer Bryce apprenticed as a shipwright. In 1850, the 18-year-old converted to Mormonism, moved to Utah, and married Mary Ann Park. At the direction of church officials, the Bryces became serial homesteaders, moving from place to place, helping to establish communities. Settling near Tropic in 1876, Bryce built a road into the amphitheater to harvest timber. Locals began calling it Bryce's Canyon. In 1880, the family moved yet again to Arizona, leaving behind their cabin and their name, which would be immortalized in 1928 with the establishment of Bryce Canyon National Park. In all, the couple pioneered 12 locations in Utah and Arizona. Through all their moves, they managed to raise 12 children to adulthood, a tremendous feat by frontier standards. That's actually just amazing. They moved so many times, they established or pioneered 12 locations and raised 12 kids. That is like unbelievable. Sometimes I feel like in our modern time that I don't know about you, but maybe I've become more wimpy. That does not sound like my existence. All right, so let's see here. Pine Valley Chapel. Pine Valley, Utah has the oldest Mormon church building still in use today. It was designed and built by Ebenezer Bryce in 1868. Trained as a shipwright, he built the church like an upside down ship's hull. He is quoted as saying, "If a flood should come, it would float, and if a wind came strong enough to blow it over, it would never crash into pieces." So not only is he founding 12 places, he's making indestructible churches similar to an upside down boat. Respect to you, Ebenezer Bryce. I can see why you have a park named after you. So as you can see, this is just that beautiful light I was talking about. Just looks gorgeous. I don't know, does this inspire you to go to Bryce Canyon National Park? It makes me want to go back. I've heard a ton of people kind of say, like, "Oh, what was your," if you talk about what was your favorite park you visited, because it's a common thing to go on, kind of exploration road trips of all the national parks in Utah and this whole greater area. And a lot of people mention Bryce, they're like, "Oh, I didn't know what to expect," but absolutely beautiful. All right, I think we have this. I think this is the last sign. Deciphering nature's palette. The colorful Claron Formation was formed 50 million years ago in a system of lakes that stretched across central Utah. Separated into an upper white member and lower pink member, both are composed primarily of limestone mixed with varying amounts of silt and clay. Intermittent layers of mudstone and sandstone were deposited as lake levels rose or fell and rivers flowed across the basin. Over the last 70 million years, this region was shifted by tectonic forces, lifting it from sea level to its present day elevations. Exposed before you at 8,000 feet or 2,438 meters, the fragile pink cliffs of the Claron Formation are sculpted by ice and rain into rock spires called hoodoos. And then it says Bryce Point. The conglomerate at Bryce Point, 50 to 100 feet thick, is the youngest rock layer seen in the park. Atop both Mesa and Bryce and Inspiration Points. Around 30 million years ago, rivers created this layer of pebbles enclosed by smaller sand grains. The pink member's softer rocks, like mudstones, erode more quickly and deeply than the more resistant layers, creating indentations that can be traced horizontally. The lower pink member, a mixture of limestone, mudstone, silt, clay, and sandstone 500 to 700 feet thick, was deposited as lake levels repeatedly rose and fell. Iron oxides create orange, reds, and yellows, while manganese oxides add purple tones. Most of the park's hoodoos form from this member. Hmm. The Claren's white member, around 300 feet thick here, formed when this was a deep lake. This pure limestone erodes, forming sheer cliffs and grottos, best seen near Bryce Point. North of Sunset Point, it has mostly eroded away. Interesting. All right, so now we're slowly making our climb out. I remember being kind of tired because I'd done some other hikes earlier in the day. This is kind of the end of the day. I also remember it rained quite a bit. There was some hail when I was driving. As you can see, these storm clouds are pretty dark. I went up to Rainbow Point, I think, too, and I remember it being a little bit thundery up there. So all sorts of cool weather changes. That's one thing about this area is like, sure, you kind of want to be prepared for everything in the spring and fall. You can kind of be cold, kind of be hot. Just depends on what you get and what the day is like. I just love this. Even these rock like walls that have been built, absolutely fantastic. Huge shout out to the any rangers or volunteers or workers that have anything to do with the trails here or Bryce Canyon National Park. Absolutely love it here. I don't think in all my 10 to 12 times visiting that I've ever even seen a piece of trash anywhere. The trails are always fantastic. Kudos to you. All right. So, lastly, I'll just read just a little bit more. I kind of got from another source about the Queen's Garden Loop and Bryce Canyon National Park. So, again, the Navajo Queen's Garden Loop is approximately 3 miles or 4.8 kilometers for the loop combining both trails. Elevation change is about 580 feet or 177 meters. Difficulty rating is moderate due to steep sections, but considered one of the best introductory hikes to Bryce Canyon's amphitheater. Trail highlights you get Thor's Hammer, a famous hoodoo that stands tall and is particularly photogenic, visible from the Navajo Trail. You also have Wall Street, which, as I mentioned, was closed at this time. A narrow section where the trail enters a small slot canyon with towering walls, providing shade and cooler temperatures. Two bridges, which we saw, which is natural stone arches along the Navajo Trail. And Queen's Garden is named for a hoodoo that resembles Queen Victoria. This part of the trail showcases numerous hoodoos with a more open garden like feel. I don't know if I felt garden like when I was in there, but we'll go with it. And, obviously there's two starting points from the rim. You can start at Sunset Point as we did, which is a good starting point for the Navajo Loop, where you can choose to enter via Wall Street or the Two Bridges side. Yeah, if you can only do like I would suggest doing this hike, but if you can only do one hike that's shorter and Wall Street is open, man, the Navajo Loop is just it just can't be beat. That is fantastic for a trail that's like just probably just over a mile in length. Absolutely fantastic scenery. But if you have more time, I would definitely consider, venturing over to the Peekaboo Loop. Fairyland Loop is really cool too. The drive up to Rainbow Point is also worthwhile. Hard to go too wrong at Bryce Canyon National Park, depending what your goals are and how adventurous and fit you may be and how much time you have. Visitor Center is pretty cool here, has a number of exhibits and things. The scenic drive itself is about 38 miles round trip. The Fairyland Loop that I just mentioned is about 8 miles. So that's definitely a bit more of a commitment than this for sure. But as a result, there might be fewer people on there. I've always had good luck in, more popular trails going really early or really late on trails. Really late is a little scary because you don't know what you're going to run into, and if you might eventually run into darkness if you go that route. So always try to carry a headlamp and keep that in mind. But a lot of times, after 4 p.m. or like a day like today where there was a storm for a lot of the day, but then the storm cleared up. It's just beautiful. We really didn't see many people on this trail at all. So keep that in mind. Also in the morning, if you can just kind of get after it, wake up at sunrise, which I know is tough, and then get out of camp or your hotel or whatever it is as quickly as possible. It can really benefit you, but I understand. Like sometimes you want to stay in and get that free hotel breakfast or hang out at your campsite for a while. I understand those approaches as well. But during that prime time in the day, trails can be a bit more crowded, parking can be more difficult to find, etc. Kind of worth pushing yourself a little bit, either that and like I said, like I have this term that I refer to as day hiker midnight. It's around 4 p.m. and it just seems like national parks. This isn't necessarily true because I feel like people are driving from far away and they might get there later in the day, so you might still see people. But gosh, most trails after like 4 p.m. or so have just the amount of people on them drops precipitously. So can be a great time to hit up trails, and you can kind of look at you know what I mean? There's numerous sources that can tell you what time sunset is. A lot of times it can be pretty late. So kind of keep that in mind. But as I said, a headlamp's a good idea. Wouldn't necessarily rely on your phone lamp. It can't, I mean, the phone flashlights do work pretty well nowadays, but if you've been using your phone to take pictures and stuff all day, or you left it on and there's in a no signal zone for a long time, it can kind of be drained quickly. I just think it's always a good idea to bring a headlamp or a flashlight with you so that it's not a stressful or not as stressful for you if you do end up enjoying a little bit of darkness. Speaking of darkness, the this is a dark sky park, and just like a lot of the areas around here, it is just absolutely fantastic at night. I mean, gosh, look at that view. That's beautiful. But it's absolutely fantastic at nighttime. You can just see the Milky Way so vividly. Oh my gosh, if you look long enough, you'll see some beautiful shooting stars. It's just absolutely fantastic. This is one of the most remote areas of the lower 48 and one of the darkest skies in the world. And again, it's just absolutely fantastic. So keep that in mind if you're here. Highly recommended. Trying to stay up or past past dark, and if you do, make sure to look up or go to a place where you can look up. Also, use caution. You are on the edge of a canyon, Bryce Canyon, a lot of times here, so certainly keep that in mind too. And we're almost up here. I actually think I'm going to stop this once we get to Sunrise Point. I have been at both Sunrise Point and Sunset Point during sunrise and sunset, and I don't know that the names are as uh Because it tends to attract like more of a crowd at sunrise point at sunrise and sunset point at sunset, obviously. But I don't know that that's necessarily what you have to follow. Like it might be slightly best, but you could kind of avoid crowds a little bit by doing the opposite or just going somewhere else along the rim or something like that. Keep that in mind. I know everybody likes a good sunrise and sunset. I am also a part of that crowd. So beautiful. But I guess what I'm saying is there's a lot of places to enjoy a good sunrise and a lot of places to enjoy a good sunset at Bryce Canyon National Park. Doesn't necessarily have to be the points that are named as such. So going up here, I just couldn't stop kind of looking at the canyon. It's just so beautiful. Yeah, and the other benefit of going the other way is that those narrow parts at the end, like Wall Street, if that were open, is like super narrow. It can be a lot cooler in there, so it kind of that dark, deep shade in the bottom of the canyon can be really good to kind of cool you down before you hike out. Whereas this side can be a little bit more exposed. As you can see, I am kind of in the shade here, but there's not towering canyon walls to provide me with the coolest shade available. So kind of keep that in mind. Overall, though, I've done this hike several times. Both ways are good. I feel so lucky because it's like, to do a hike like this and you kind of become familiar with it. Still have a lot of places to visit in my life, but been super fortunate to go to a ton. Part of that is just I moved to Colorado several years ago and have just, Colorado's fantastic. Summer is short but absolutely amazing. But then in kind of fall and spring, it's kind of desert season. So you head over to the desert because like Colorado is a little bit, in late fall it can be kind of too much snow to enjoy hiking, too little snow to start skiing or doing those winter activities. And then in springtime, like there's like a ton of snow, but like conditions and stuff don't really aren't really the best for skiing necessarily or winter activities, but you kind of want them to melt out a bit more before you can start doing a lot of the hikes. So as a result, you head down to the desert. And I've been super lucky, it's not too far. Utah borders Arizona, obviously. So I'll go down and do some desert adventures. And I've been super lucky to do quite a few of them. I also find, for the most part, depending how you travel, you can do it relatively cheaply. There's a lot of public lands where you can camp for free, or just staying in a campground or something like that. And then I tend to prefer that really. And I think the last trip I went on, I went for like a couple months, and I don't think I stayed in a hotel once. I don't really mind sleeping in my truck or sleeping in my tent one bit. But I'm unusual in that respect. I am aware of that. Like, and I've done it quite a bit more than most people. Not trying to brag, just being honest. So I kind of have my systems a little bit more dialed. So now we're kind of on the final stretch up to the rim here. And then I think I'm going to end the video at this once we get up to this point. If you want to see what the rim trail looks like, check out my other video of Navajo Queen's Garden Loop, which I will put in the comments. And then, if I'm honest, the 360 camera is cool, but I've found people don't really like the 360 aspect because you do kind of have to move your mouse around. So maybe I'll try like editing it. I find it really cool because you just kind of can move around. It's cool on your phone too because if you just move your phone, it'll move like what you're looking at, which is pretty cool. But I don't know. You probably need one of those fancy. What's that new Apple thing called? The Vision Pro or something like that. I bet the 360 videos are really cool in there. But I think from the other perspective, I need to do a lot more editing because you can kind of edit where the shot is looking and stuff like that. So I'll try to do that eventually. But the first few times I've attempted it, I found the software to be extremely slow. And then just, the learning curve is pretty high. So my skill level is pretty low. And if you do just like let it go with the full 360, like again, it's cool, but you have to move it around and then just the default where it's pointing isn't ideal. So I can see why people might get annoyed at that if it's not, kind of pointing straight ahead when you're hiking, which it's, probably the more ideal. Anyway, just blabbering on. Hope everyone's having a great day. Let me know if you're able to make it to Bryce Canyon National Park. Such a beautiful place. One other note is that I do kind of delete or try to delete all the breaks and things that I took. So, and I do tend to be a little bit of a faster hiker than most. So I would not take the video length as the time it will take you. I would definitely give yourself more time. I'm sure some people are laughing at that and they're like, I could just sprint this and I can do it in 20 minutes. Good for you. But just for the vast majority of people, I would assume that I probably do it a little bit faster. And again, I do if you're more into taking breaks and a little bit slower exploration, that's cool. I don't think there's any wrong way to explore this. Um, I but just give yourself more time. Always a good idea to bring a few snacks, a few layers on a hike, just so that you're not, there's no stress, right? We don't want to be stressed on these beautiful hikes. So this kind of defines the Queen's Garden Trail, which I read to you before. And then we're just going to go at Sunrise Point and look at this beautiful, beautiful viewpoint. Huge thanks to everyone for joining me today. Again, it is super helpful if you could just like or subscribe. I have tons of hiking videos. Hopefully, people will find them useful. In all honesty, they're not the most popular at this point, but I mean, I can understand. I'm certainly not creating like Mr. Beast content, but I'm hoping like this could be all these videos could be like a guidebook of sorts, so you can just kind of go on and just check stuff out and like like either have it on in the background because it's the whole hike, or kind of takes off a little bit where guidebooks leave off, right? And those and like the apps on your phone leave off because you actually want to see what it's like, right? I mean, they're always more beautiful in person, I would argue, but cool to see a video as well. All right, thank you guys so much for joining me. Have a great day.